get started. We're going to be talking about not only their stories, but the practical advice that they can share with you about how to get started in the world of sport. And if you already have a platform in sport, how you can use that to continue to not only advance your career, but advance the women that are coming after you. So let's get to it. I'm super excited. Let's get started. So Tori, you are going to be the first panelist up for this first round of questions. What I love about your story is, as I said earlier, you are really paving a new way, what it's like to be a woman and a mother and have a career, especially have a career in a male-dominated industry such as sports. So I would love if you could share with us what your journey was like to getting to where you are as the head coach at Howard University for their softball team. And what's your advice for other professionals who you may think it's too late to get back in the game, or they started a family and they're kind of balancing that career and family?
Right. My journey definitely was interesting. I went to University of Nebraska and I graduated. And a year later, I had Skylar and was working a corporate job. And I wasn't miserable at that moment. And then I remember I'm competitive in everything I do, and I'm promoted relatively quickly. And I was, driving home one day after my promotion, and I was just miserable. And I literally had to ask myself, like, what would Skylar do? And I was missing just being in sport, missing being a part of a team. And when you don't feel like you're impacting people, and you kind of lose purpose. I didn't have purpose. So I walked away from a very comfortable job to no job. I moved to Germany, and I was with her dad, and he was playing overseas, and he gets cut a month after I go out there. And now we're back in America, and I'm like on stuck. And just being a Black woman and a single mom, trying not to be a statistic. And I was like, I got to figure out a way. And I sent out like 80 emails and got a lot of 80 no's, or I'm not looking right now. And just arguably the most humbling time in my life. At this point, I'm like giving clothes to Play-Doh closet. I'm giving blood. And I finally got my yes. And so when I got my yes, I made a decision that I refused to fail. I took a risk. Me and Skylar drove from Nebraska to Daytona Beach. I had never been there, found a place on Craigslist. That's a story in itself. And I wanted to be a head coach before she hit kindergarten, and understanding there was going to be a lot of moving. And I did it. I became a head coach in 4.5 years. I went from Bethune-Cookman to Cal State Fullerton. And again, I had to leave Bethune-Cookman because I was a Black woman at a historically Black school. Kind of expected. I loved it, but I had to go prove that I could compete at another level. So I go to Cal State Fullerton, won 2 championships. And then the word on the street was like, well, you haven't done anything at a Power 5 school. So I had to go to University of Maryland. And I was like, what can I do to help them better? They hadn't made it to the Big Ten tournament in like 5 years. Got them to the Big Ten tournament. And then I went and coached pro for a summer. And then Howard opened up down the street in Washington, D.C. And I know that this job was made for me. I think that I was led to be here. When I got to Maryland, I didn't know why I was here. I had a really hard time with my purpose. But I know it was just to set me up for Howard. And it has not been easy. So I 10 for 10 don't recommend my route. But at the end of the day, if it happens, then do it. I don't think that we should put limitations. I don't think that children are blessings. Starting a family is a blessing. We have to be very careful in using them and making them a burden. My daughter is not a burden. She encouraged me. I want Skylar to know, whether you have a son or a daughter, you are choosing them what the next generation of women will look like. So if it's a son, if you're sitting here like, I can't do this because I have you, then they're going to think that that is what is expected of women. We are allowed to choose us. And I chose me. And I chose me because I want Skylar to choose her. And then I want Skylar's child to choose, know that they're okay to choose themselves. So I chose me, obviously considering my daughter. What separates me from my counterparts is I do have limitations. But the limitations I choose. I don't want to raise Skylar in certain areas, so I won't go there. I don't care how good the money is. So I have to set boundaries, and I choose to be a mom. And I think that we have to be careful with our words. It's not that I can coach or can be in sport and have a child. I will. And when I change my attitude to start saying, I will do this, all of a sudden I could find solutions. So, and also just being humble enough to ask for help and receive it. I have had an army of people, and it truly does take a village. but it also takes you as a mother to be okay with receiving that help. There's always people around us, and I had to humble myself and do that. But again, I encourage everyone to choose themselves, and there's never a wrong time to choose yourself. You don't have to like wait 5 years before you choose you. Choose you immediately. Change your mindset to I can do this to I will. I can isn't enough. This is hard. I can is not enough. I will has to be the mindset. And again, we are training the next generation. These children are blessings. They are not burdens, and I am training my daughter that she can choose her whenever she wants, and she can find a way.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tori. That was incredible. And in that first question, you touched on so many different pieces that are so important. One being handling rejection. I think so often when we go to make a career shift or a change, or we want to break into an industry that's not necessarily built for us, the rejection can be what prevents you from even taking that first step. And, you know, there's so many of us who would be like, I got told 80 times that I'm not good enough. But I think the key of what your story shows is that to be persistent in that, and to know to be persistent in your passions, right? And you might be the only one on this journey, but if you are resilient like you have been, you will find it, and look where you are today. And I think so many of us here, you know, we clapped at the end of what you were saying, but it's true. It's really, children are the next generation. You know, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about advancing the next generation. And by you, like, following a career that gives you purpose, that gives you happiness, that gives you this platform, you're also teaching your daughter on how to do the same and how to choose herself, which as women, you know, we're so often taught to fit in this certain box, and maybe pursue things that we aren't necessarily passionate about. So thank you. Incredible advice, incredible story. And I can't wait to ask you more questions and circle back. All right, Majken, you are up next. Talking about identity and our different career journeys, you have achieved an incredible amount from your days working in media to then starting the Global Goals World Cup. You are a longtime film producer turned co-founder. You've also received the International Olympic Committee Award for Women in Sport in Europe for the work that you've been doing to advance women. So I would love for you to share more about what that inflection point was like for you when you had a successful career in media and film, and you were asked to take your skills and then jump into a totally different career path. What was it like navigating that? And if you could share more about that story too, it would be great.
I think it's important to all realize that everything that we have learned, you know, in growing up and in being an adult, and all of it can fit into your next position you decide to do. So nothing is ever wasted. All your learnings and all the books that you read, all the, you know, the collaborations that you did, they find their way of being in your next steps, and being a strength for your next step. So my years of producing films also work really well within the sports, because I mean, of all things, you know, as a film producer, is that you need to put the perfect team together. And that equally is that I became good at producing a film because I was good at doing team sports when I was a child and when I was younger. So it things fit together. You're meant to be in the world, and you're meant to take the steps that you feel that you want to take. So they come in at different places. So dare to look at them, dare to think, is this the universe, or is it somebody knocking up my door that these are new changes or new steps for me to take? So it became, I mean, I was out making a comedy, and I was walking around in the middle of nowhere with my crew, and then the mayor of Copenhagen, she called me up and said, listen, you know, I need to do the international year in Copenhagen. It was the climate summit and there was the mayor's summit, and I need somebody from the outside to come and produce that show for me. But it was also the year where there was the year where the Olympic Committee was going to decide who was going to win the Olympic World Cup for 2016. So there was all these sports people also coming into her year that year. So and I was like, listen, you know, I've never worked in politics. I was walking around in my sneakers and, you know, nothing to do with high heels or, that scene in my life at all. But at the same time, I've been producing films for 20 years. So I was like, why not? And I took that period of time, a few years, and learned the political world of working within that. But it was all my experience of producing a show. The films, the mayors, 80 mayors from around the world that came in, I just treated them as my actors. They didn't know that. But for me, it was the same thing. I had to make sure that they did the things that she wanted them to do, in a sense, right? And then that became the obvious jump for me in a way. So I had an in between before I jumped into full-time working in sports. But the working in sports really came from it was who is now our Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, in Denmark today. She was at that time, she was not, but she was in politics, and she invited a group of us, a group of women, and saying, listen, we really need more images of women in media, and we need them to be powerful and show great stories and being active. And that just made me look at my old sport and just say, okay, what is the stage? And this is like 15 years ago, what is the stage of women's football? And it was pretty sad at the time. It's picked up these last years, but it was sad at that time. And then that kind of became my first steps of going into sports. First, it was for several years where I was, on my kind of volunteering, next to a job, I was making these big football tournaments for women. That was all about making the media strong, together with the fashion magazines and taking my acting friends, making them, ambassadors and role models into the big women's tournament, and doing them at music festivals and around where we would get attention to the women actually doing sports. So there's a million ways of moving forward, but there will always be a way. And there will always, if you get stuck in things, I think that always somebody there to ask and call somebody and say, listen, I need to take a step. How do I take that step the best way? That's also why I often talk about teams, having a great team, having great teams in your life. These are the ones that you can always go to and ask them to open doors or break down barriers together with you.
Absolutely. No, it's so important. And even you need to kind of build your team as you make a career transition too, right? You need to find those people who are going to support you and you can bounce ideas off of. And what I think is so incredible about your story, and it goes back to your first point, is you never really had the intention of starting the Global Girls World Cup. It just kind of happened when someone asked you, what can we do to help advance women in media? And then one step further, women in sport. And you've truly been globalizing and changing the industry for women. And we'll talk a bit more too about how Majken and her team actually execute on these events too, because they have done, they're it seems like every single country, every major city, they're at every major event. And it's really quite impressive how she actually executes them. So we'll talk more about that too in a moment. And Nicole, so Majken's story actually leads me to you, because you also kind of took the tools that you used in the fashion industry to start what your platform is now. So I would love to hear more about how you connected these pieces together and what the kind of the uncertain journey was like to actually starting what your platform is today.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually thinking that just a moment too, where it's so important to lean into the skills that you already have, and they can just be applied to something different. I used to think that I needed to acquire a whole new skill set in order to succeed in an industry that I had not before entered. And I really didn't embrace what I had worked on in the fashion industry, because I have a retail operations background. I was saying, I don't want to work behind the scenes. I don't want to be that person who does the work and then doesn't get to come up to the proverbial or literal stage and get to talk about it. And I found that I wanted to be someone who was more outward facing and who was the head of their own personal brand, and kind of the behind the scenes stuff didn't really appeal to me as much, because you create something, whether you design it or you come up with a process for people to implement. It's like you give it away and then you don't actually get to see what the impact is. I want to be able to take something that I can create and then see how it's actually applied in the real world, and getting to experience that. Seeing the look on someone's face when they discover that they can actually do that thing, it's really cool to be a part of that. And when I started on my own, I thought that, okay, now it's just time to be that public figure. And really, when you're an entrepreneur, you kind of have to be every single person. You do have to still be the behind the scenes person, especially as a one person team. And realizing that when it comes down to it, just because I'm not working in spreadsheets anymore doesn't mean that I don't get to think creatively and brainstorm effective solutions. And again, having experience in a different sector actually has really benefited me and given me an edge that I never would have been able to anticipate. Because if we're talking about fitness, I've zoned in before on the boutique fitness industry, especially in New York. And now that does not exist anymore, as the studios are effectively still primarily closed and have been since March. But just realizing that you don't have to have this specific set of skills to apply to a very niche industry. Having experience in an industry that, we've been doing omni-channel retail for now over 10 years. As consumers, we've all been shopping online now for many years. And then in the fitness industry, they're saying, wait, do you think that even once studios reopen, people will still want to work out online? And it's like, of course they will. Of course they're still going to want to work online, because digital is not something that's in the future anymore. It's not like this weird tech idea. It's the now, and if you don't embrace how your industry is changing, you will be left behind, because people think that the industry is so competitive, but in reality, it's just saturated. And so I help people with their challenges and realize that they are special because only they are offering what they offer. It doesn't matter about just the name of the product or service. It's about being able to really articulate why someone should come on this new digital journey with you. It's about positioning your own digital brand or positioning yourself just as someone in a new space. And then on the other side, it's saying to your client, hey, I know that this whole futuristic thing, I know that it's new for you. It's actually new for me too. And this is how we're going to get through it together. And this is how it's going to just, I hate saying become the new normal, because I feel like that was so like 6 to 9 months ago, but it basically still rings true, how you're going to share this whole new experience. And even this event is a wonderful example of how we have taken our communities from being in person, and now we can be all together from around the world. And I think that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. There's so many new opportunities. And I think especially when we think in the world of sport and we think the world of fitness, but Nicole, to your point, especially being based here in New York City, like fitness studios and brands were like just all over the place. And it was so competitive and so saturated. And I think it's so interesting that now you brought up such a good point that I never thought about, that they were actually old in how they operated their businesses. And now we can see the new opportunity that there is to be virtual. I mean, I even see that here with the WOW series. I thought when the pandemic first happened, I was like, oh my gosh, my life is over. How am I supposed to bring people in person anymore together? I'm just going to go and crawl in a hole and cry, and I don't know what's going to happen. Anyway, so then I did that for like a day, and then I couldn't hide in my hole anymore. So, and look at where we are today, taking advantage of the new opportunity of our virtual world has brought together all of us from Denmark, from the West Coast to the East Coast, like truly all around the world. So Nicole, I'm definitely excited to talk more about how you actually advise different fitness professionals and studios to take advantage of these new systems. I don't know if we have anyone here who's looking to make a career into the fitness space or brand, but Nicole is going to definitely touch on how to actually execute that here in our next couple of rounds of questions. So thank you, Nicole. And on that note, let's transition back to the world of sport at our universities and what competing as any college or student athlete has done for us. So I don't know about anyone else here, but I was a student athlete, and I personally really struggled with life after sport. You know, I had no idea this was my identity. I was a swimmer, and I was like hung out with all these student athletes, and like I felt so confident and fit and strong, and like it was the only thing that I poured every piece of my heart and mind into. Like it was just sport. Like, yeah, I studied, but I didn't even really know what I wanted to do with my career. Like for me, it was all about competing. And what I love about Jenn's story is that it's so relatable. She wasn't at a Big 10 or Big 12 school to compete. She rather started a team from scratch as one of the founding members of the rugby team at Quinnipiac University. So Jenn, I would love for you to share your story about what it was like to be the underdog and how taking that new opportunity, what was new back then, has really changed your life and career. And really how you got to your journey of playing professionally rugby now, and any advice in there that you have for people who have kind of been in our shoes would be great as we think about how we can get back to competing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Abigail. I love being on things like these because it reminds me of my journey and how like truly grateful I am that I've been on it and that I'm still here. So I went to, I always played sports growing up. I played basketball, softball, volleyball, love sports, love the team aspect. And I could have gone to college to play softball, but I wasn't really passionate about the sport as I got older. So I went to Quinnipiac University in Hamden, Connecticut, pretty small. And Nicole probably knows where that is. You know, I was planning on joining like intramurals or something like that. But I remember visiting my friend in a dorm and seeing a little flyer on the wall, and it said, you know, are you interested in playing rugby? You know, we're the first NCAA team, a Division I rugby team in the country. Are you interested in joining and helping build a program? So, you know, my mom always told me to take opportunities, to strive to take them and just go with it. And that's how I grew up. So I remember seeing the flyer and I was like, all right, let's try it. I've seen a movie about this. It can't be that hard. I was proven wrong very quickly. Very quickly. I thought my background with playing many sports, which it did help, but I remember seeing the movie Invictus, if anyone's ever seen it, and Nelson Mandela in South Africa. So I tried out for the sport and made it. At the time, it was their first year NCAA, and they only had about three or four recruits. But of course, they had to go around campus to find other players to make a team, right? There's 15 girls on the field. You need about 20, 28 on a roster. So they went around campus, and you know, our first year it was about just kind of learning the game. And so on. Second year, same thing. We were really, really bad. We were playing teams that have been established for years. We were losing by 100, 150. And at the time, it was very discouraging. However, you know, we didn't just want to be that team on campus because we also wanted the same resources as our peers, right? We were NCAA. We were given those. We weren't given everything that everyone else had. But we wanted to prove a point. So we kind of had it like a chip on our shoulder. And it was kind of like, all right, like we may have just started playing this sport, but if we train hard, our coaches told us, you know, they really instilled the fact that we needed to believe in ourselves and work hard and it's going to happen. And we just kept doing it. So we left after my sophomore year for the summer. We all trained. Everyone came back super fit. And then the first game, we won. And it was crazy. And it was kind of like, oh my God, I think we can do this. Like, I think we can actually like have a winning season. And then, you know, we rallied together with the team and we just kept training every day. And then we won the next game and the next game. And next thing you know, we were playing in the spring at nationals against the top club teams. This included about like Indiana University, Penn State, Stanford. So we were traveling all over the country then. And then my senior year, My junior year, we were 5th, and then my senior year, we became 3rd. So yeah, it's so crazy with like just that college part of how much we grew as a team, but also how much I grew as a person. I just started the sport in college, and I told Abby during our previous interview that, at the time I wasn't a rugby player. I played rugby. I loved the aspect about the team. I loved challenging myself. I loved, going hard and competing. I'm like a crazy competitor, so it was perfect, but it gave me other resources. It gave me the confidence to speak the fact that, our college newspaper was not reporting on us and we were winning, all these things. And going back to the opportunity part, our coaches were really adamant on, hey, you're playing for those that are coming after you. You're trying to build a platform so more schools can join and believe in this mission of NCAA rugby to provide opportunities for young women to play. And that, for me, what drove me in college. I thought I was part of something bigger. I thought it was amazing that I was, playing every time I stepped on the field. It was for that young girl that once she gets to high school and she starts applying to colleges, that she has the opportunity to play in college with a scholarship and have the resources, athletic training, academic advisors, strength and conditioning, the same thing as other sports. So that was really big for me. And then I was ready to go work corporate, and my assistant coach was like, hey, I got a job down at Sacred Heart University, down the street. I want you to come and help me build a program there. Like, you get this as an athlete. I want you to come over and help me build it. And I remember we were at Brown University at a tournament, and as she told me, I was putting my mouth guard in, running on the field to go play. And I looked back and I was like, yes. And it felt right. I was impacted so much by my coaches and the experience that I had playing this sport at Quinnipiac, and I wanted to do the same for others. So then in 2015, I graduated that fall. I was at Sacred Heart University, starting a brand new program, except this one we were transitioning from club to NCAA. So that came with its own challenges, but my plan was to be there for 2 or 3 years, and I'm still there. So, it's sometimes hard, and I'm sure a lot of us can relate when you want to make an impact on so many women, but you're not going to impact everyone. So if I can impact 1 or 2, that means the world to me. And I have, and it really is giving back to my experience as a collegiate athlete, and coaching then kind of got me back into playing. So I started playing. The beauty about rugby here in the States is, well, everywhere actually, is that you can still play into your adult years as long as you want, pretty much. And I stopped playing for a year, and then one of my friends started playing again in New Haven, and one of my friends played out of the team in New York City, and he was like, hey, I really think you can play with this like higher level team, this elite team in New York. I think you should try it out. So I started commuting from Connecticut to New York City. I am from New York, but started commuting to New York City to play with this team, and started playing. And then from there, it brought me opportunities to other teams, which I currently play for New York Rugby Club. But at the time, it was kind of like, oh, I really think I can actually take this somewhere. Like, I'm good. Like, I can compete against these players that come from these top, like super top clubs. And from there, I joined Northeast Academy, which was the Olympic Development Academy for the Northeast region here in the States. Started touring with them, playing, and then just last year, I'm half Mexican. I'm also Haitian, but the Mexican national coach saw me play in Las Vegas, and he approached me with an opportunity to join the Mexican team and help them develop there. And that was something that was dear to my heart since I did it as an athlete, and now as a coach, that really drives me, is to build programs and see the whole cycle of them starting from the ground up. And so that's kind of how I got to playing for Mexico. I can go on, but my advice for others is whatever you're passionate about, keep exploring it. If it brings you joy, don't stop, because I know for me, like if I look back, if in 5 years I look back, I'm not going to regret doing this, right? I would regret not doing this. And that's something that I wouldn't want to take into my years of thinking like, hey, I had the opportunity to do something and I could have done it, but I was either too scared or I didn't want to, I wanted to be more traditional in certain aspects. And everyone here has taken that risk, right? That's why we're here. And that's why we've been successful, but we've also failed. So just if it's something brings you joy and passion, keep exploring it. You never know where it's going to lead you, as it led me to playing for Mexico and coaching, and you don't know who it's going to lead you to as well. So
yes, Jenn, and thank you. I mean, there's so many incredible points in your story. Now everyone here can experience, exactly why I asked you to speak, because so many of us on this call were athletes, were related to sport or fitness in some way, like Nicole's a dancer. A lot of us here competed. And your story just goes to show, like, and you just said it ending with the power of believing in yourself. It's such a simple fact, but it is so hard to do because we're told you're too old to do this, or you competed in college, you're not good enough for the next level. And just what's so great is that you took this opportunity however many years ago, and you had no idea that it would put you where you are now. Like, you are truly a pioneer in sport and women in sport for rugby. And every single person here has that opportunity. And you can see from our panelists, they've all been pioneers in the different ways. Tori as a coach and a woman of color in her position. Nicole really paving the way for the fitness industry to bring it into the new generation and our new way of technology. Majken hosting these events all around the world and getting women represented in football throughout the world. It's just so incredible. And it just all goes back to that same point of being persistent in what you're passionate about and just honestly believing in yourself, even if it feels like you're the only one. And every time I talk to you, I'm like, I have to go start competing. I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I don't want to swim anymore. But every time I talk to you, I'm like, okay, what's next? What's the sport I need to take on?
Do it. And I think just one last thing, it's like you get you're making these goals, right? And when you reach something, you start doubting yourself, and it's like, why? I think Tori mentioned, that we put these limits on ourselves, but you believing in yourself got you there, or to the first step. You got to keep going. You have to.
Exactly. I love it. And Tori, let's bring it back to you now, actually. So what we talked about in our interview and what I just mentioned is the reality is you are a woman of color in a sport and an industry that hasn't seen you before, right? We see a lot of people who maybe look more like me. We see a lot of men in this industry, and you have had to come in and navigate what that is like. And I think it's so important to share what that journey was like and to recognize the different challenges that you faced. And in an interview, one of my favorite quotes that you said is you had to train people on how to treat you, which the first reason I liked it is because I thought about it after our interview and I was like, have I had to do that? Like, I think I have had maybe certain privileges where like, I don't really need to train people on how to treat me because who I am is so represented in the media and we can be all these different things. But where you come in is a different challenge of you're women who look like you, who are in your position and background are typically represented differently in the media. As we talked about, we're represented as this certain type of person, and you came in and you had to train people on that's what you've seen on TV or here and there, but this is me and this is who I am, and let's have this conversation about how we can work together. So I would love for you to share more about, what it's been like paving your way in this industry, and also share more about what it was like setting boundaries, because that's applicable to all of us here. Setting boundaries and having these conversations about here's how I work and here's who I am, and let's figure out how we can work together. Really training someone on how to work with you.
All right, thank you. Like I had mentioned in my intro, I think that the first time I kind of realized it, and I always was aware. I mean, we are playing softball, which you're right is completely a predominantly white sport. In one, just even in my position, being a Black pitcher, typically when you see Black athletes in our sport, it's like the really fast slapper, or she's like a pinch runner when she goes to a bigger school, or they play outfield. Me being a pitcher and being at the center of the field, I can remember 2 Black pitchers growing up that I admired. And then being at a historically Black school in the Black community, especially when I was even in the Black community, that was kind of like worst case scenario. Like if you ended up at a historically Black school, it was like that's kind of all that was available to you. So that's why I think it's so funny now. We growing up, like jokingly someone would be like, man, you're going to end up at like Bethune-Cookman or something. And then I ends up being the first place I coach. And now I'm in people's home trying to sell Bethune-Cookman. So just the irony in all of it. And I think trying to just untrain people on that in itself. I went back to a historically Black school because I wanted people to know that being there isn't a burden. Like I'm there because I want to be. I went from coaching professionally to my next job becoming a head coach at a historically Black school. That in itself is retraining the community. So now any young athletes that were watching me, they know that I didn't have to be there. Everyone knows that I didn't have to be there. I left Bethune-Cookman to prove to other people that that I could do what I needed to do and I could be successful. And now I am returning back to a historically Black university because I want to be there. And I think that there's so much power in that. Especially as I go and recruit. And then as I started moving, right? So I leave Bethune-Cookman, which I kind of got to be my authentic self, but also just being a mother, I fought against not wanting to be the statistic of like a single mom and needing all this help. So finding that fine line, I remember when me and Skylar drove to Daytona, they had 6 a.m. conditioning. And the coach told me like, hey, I know you have Skylar, it's going to take some time. And I was like, no, like, me and Skylar were at the workout at 6 a.m. I don't need help. I will take it. But I wanted to just kind of show I can do this and me and Skylar can figure this out. And then I moved on. And I remember my next couple jobs, I went from being where a lot of people looked like me to becoming the only one in a lot of offices that I was in. And, you know, I remember there was like a lot of conversations that I kind of had to take a hit on or felt like I did. And I will say this for anybody. I think the only time we feel pressure to act like someone else or be who someone's expecting us to be is when we don't spend enough time alone deciding who we are. So now you're in conflict. So I go and I took that job and they wanted me to come in and be like the big Black mean coach. And I remember like I get up there and I'm like, the coach was like, are you going to yell at him? Like there was like literally, and I was like, no, like that. I know that like there was this expectation, like actually, no, I'm probably going to get to know her first. I'm going to see how she's wired. So I remember having to explain myself to some of these coaches. Like, I know that there's this idea and it doesn't help. Like my dad's this big Black mean guy and or they think people don't know him right from the outside. So it was like this expectation I was going to come in and I'm like, no, I actually get to know the kids. Like, believe it or not, I sit down and try to have a little lunch with them and get to know them and see what their goals are. And then one, like I said, I had to train them, untrain them on this idea. And also there's this idea that, you know, all Black people can dance and sing and loud and are funny. And like, I mean, I might be a little like deaf out of my left ear. I get a little loud sometimes, but I'm actually kind of monotone. Like this is my loud. And I, believe it or not, like I got to work to dance. It doesn't come naturally to me. Like, it really doesn't. So like when I would come in and I'm not like dancing on command, like actually guys, I kind of want to focus today. Like I'm not mad. I don't have an attitude. You got a goal. I got a goal. I don't feel like dancing today and being okay with saying that, like, cause truly I spent a year when I first left Bethune, that first job I had, where I would go home almost in tears, feeling like I did something wrong. Cause it was like text, like, are you okay? And I'm like, I thought I was like, I mean, I didn't think anything was wrong, but because I wasn't dancing or singing or being loud, it was like a problem. And so I was like, at first I took it personal. Why? Because I didn't spend enough time like on me, right? I hadn't spent enough time in deciding on who I am. I am Tori. I occasionally like to dance. Sometimes I'm on beat. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I can be really funny and sometimes I can be really focused, and I'm allowed to be that. I don't have to be what you thought I needed to be in order for this team to function. And I'm so glad the first time and I know I spoke about this in the interview of just having a big game and setting boundaries as a mother. I remember my daughters, you know, everything flooded. And I got news that everything had flooded from the top floor to my bottom floor. And a lot of things I bought Skylar, it was done. And I remember in a practice and the coach was like, you're not going to leave, are you? And I'm like, Yeah, I actually was planning on going to like clear it up. Skylar was still at school, so it was really important for me to just go get that cleared up and taken care of. And I remember she was so upset. And at the time, again, I took it a little personal. But at the end of the day, I have to train her. I have to train her so that the next mother that goes there is allowed to say no, and she's received a no before. Because I think sometimes we're being noble. We think we're being noble, but you're actually putting the next coach in a very, very tough spot, who sometimes needs, it's okay for us to say no. We are allowed to say no. Again, obviously we can't be saying no to everything, but I'm allowed to go be a mother, and I needed to be a mother in that moment. I know we had conversations. There was little things like, again, I spent time with myself that year, and I'm so grateful for that year. That's why someone had said earlier, like everything kind of sets you up. And I remember that year I was challenged a lot on setting boundaries, and making decisions on who I am, and not living up to the identity of what this mom, this good mother coach is supposed to look like. I can be both. I didn't have to sacrifice being a good mom. And I remember the coach, I was unhappy, and she goes, I don't get it. I mean, we're only did this. And I told her, it is very important for me. I sat down with myself. Picking my daughter up from school did something for me. Might sound weird. It did something for me. It made me feel like I was being a good mom. I knew I couldn't do it every day because I had to work with pictures and then we had practice, but I needed it twice a week. And so you guys, we have to bet on ourselves. I am good enough at what I do to go and also have my needs met. And I think that sometimes we get into sport and we get into professions where we're trying to constantly be enough for other people. It is their job to be enough for us too. Like, and so I remember going in, and it was the hardest conversation I had at that time. And I was like, listen, I think I give you a lot, right? Like, we were really successful. We were a top 30 team. And I said, and the pitchers are thriving. I think I give you enough to be able to go pick my daughter up 2 times a week minimum. Tough conversation in the moment, but she received it. And I feel grateful that I know now that another mother is going to be able to walk into that room and get what she needs to be met, because we can be dope mothers, we can be dope coaches, we can do all of that. We don't have to sacrifice it. So again, I battled it on a lot of different realms, but I think that it is our job in whatever profession we are, that we are setting them up, and we set those, we break, those passive aggressive, microaggressive behaviors that people believe. I have to untrain that for them so that the next Black woman, Black man that walks into the building can be much more comfortable than I was. The next mother can be comfortable being a really good mom and a really, really good coach. And just like I said, and bet on yourselves. I think that we don't do that because we don't bet on ourselves, but also we don't spend enough time alone. I will say this, you can't go in there with all these demands that you don't even commit to. You can't say that you need time for self-care, and then when you have a moment for self-care, you're like, I can't because I'm so busy. Let me tell you something. If I have to scout, but I feel like I need to get my nails done because it's going to make me feel good, I'm going to get my nails done, because we can't be where our feet are if we don't feel good. I hate this message that to be a good coach, I'm sacrificing everything that makes me happy. No, that's weird. I don't want the next group of women to go in their profession like, yeah, you got to be a little selfless, but you can't be where your feet are. You can't be the best version of yourself if you're not taking care of yourself. So even making that kind of commitment, this might seem really small for you. I need to take a walk during my lunch break. I can't sit in here with you guys and discuss the lineup because I'm going to take a walk because I need it, because I want to be really present when I get back in this office and be where my feet are. I know that that's a ton, but I'm like so big on that. And we are consistently, whether you want to or not, Abigail, you have trained someone how to treat you. You just don't know you did it yet. You said it, you set a tone, and you trained someone, and you're either training them in the best way possible or you're training them bad, but you're always training someone. So I love it.
Oh yes, Tori, thank you. I know. And I go back to that one point with what you said about knowing yourself helps you better to set boundaries, because I mean, from where I started to where I am now, now it's like, this is my business. This is my baby. I just know, like, it's it. It's so easy for me to set boundaries when it's mine. But then when I'm at my corporate job, something I've had to learn now that I'm a bit older and 27 is I was like, similar to you, Tori, and this was after years of being steamrolled as like a young professional and a younger woman in corporate America. And then I spent some time just kind of, like you said, alone and with myself and figuring out, I actually have so much to offer. And my corporate job isn't going to steamroll like into this or that. Like if I need to leave to go take care of myself, I'm going to leave and go take care of myself. And to your point, it's interesting because once I learned that and I found a job that respected that, and it was not easy to set the boundary because my 9 to 5, I work at a law firm, and you know how that is. There's no such thing as like taking breaks or having a life, but I work truly 9 to 5 and I'm out. And if they need me to stay, I'm like, why does this need to get done right now? Can it get done tomorrow? Like no one's gonna die between today and tomorrow if this thing doesn't get done right now. And that's been the hardest lesson to learn, but it's because of women like Tori, and even like Emily's a mentor of mine. So many people, and Katie, people in my community have come before me and showed me that that's possible. And it's sharing these stories that let yet other young women see that you are enough and you can set these boundaries. And I also love when you said like they need to be enough for me too. I loved when you said that because that's so important. It's a two-way street. So thank you, Tori, for sharing that. And one last piece too is your advice on motherhood is so important too. I don't know if we have any mothers here, but setting those boundaries is so important. And it's important that we talk about it too, you know, because so many of us are talking about our careers, but our life is so much more than a career. We have a life and family and things that we love so much more than what we're doing professionally. So thank you for sharing your story there. And we're gonna go ahead and transition back to Majken. So Majken is not a coach, but she's a leader in many different ways. And what I'm so impressed about what she's created with the Global Girls World Cup is that she is, in a way, what she's doing in her work is coaching different communities throughout the world, coaching them on how to execute these events, how to advance women, how the work that they're doing is advancing women. And they've successfully held more than 100 global events. And in that, you're educating, Majken, if I'm not mistaken, you're also educating and giving more resources to these women in these different communities that might not have had the opportunity to learn how to host an event and be represented in the media. So I would love for you to share really how you got to create the business model of the Global Goals World Cup, and in turn, the impacts that you're having. So that way some of us listening here can have some great some ideas on how to do this in our own journeys.
So I just want to start out saying, firstly, I mean, Tori, thank you for sharing your stories. And now my kids are adults, but I would say that I was a coach for 10 years where I was coaching my daughter's team, playing soccer, playing football. And these are some of the best years giving out of my life, that I took that time. And I think I will say that there's definitely been producing jobs that I didn't get because I was always 3 times a week. I left early from work because I was going to go coaching. And that was just, you know, my way of saying that I have to do my thing also, even though that I know that we're still filming and we're still doing that part of it. I needed to give that. I needed to go and do that. And today the community that I have of women that are now the same age as my daughter is 27, and now of these women that has been in my network, you know, in the years that I was coaching them, but afterwards when they realized what I was doing, and I invited them on to join any event that I was making, you know, if it was just the football events that I was doing in Copenhagen, come and voluntarily work for us. If it was at music festivals, it became their first entrance into going into a music festival, but in a safe, in a sense, environment. And then traveling now, I mean, I will have some of them that they are joining me in Jordan when we play in April, where they are coming down there. They've been doing refugee work, coaching women in refugee camps here in Denmark for some years now. And now they're going to join me and see the work that we're doing in some of the refugee camps in Jordan. So that whole connection that you have with your children and their network growing up as a role model for those next generations. So I really encourage all of you, always make sure that you do a sport, always make sure that your children does, but if you can combine some of it by coaching or playing together, doing sports together and stuff like that, then for sure take that time. I mean, it is valuable time that you have with your children. And suddenly, I mean, for me, it feels like, whoa, she's 27, right? It feels weird, wild that she's an adult person now. It went so quickly. So in the tournaments and traveling around the world, I mean, I started Salomon United, which is weekly refugee training in camps for women here in Denmark. And what I did the first when I heard about one of the camps, and I just realized, like, it's like, God, I know so little, right? I mean, and I just took some footballs and put it in the back of my car, and I drove out there, and I knocked on the door, and I just said, listen, I mean, there was like 3 women in the kitchen, and I walked in there and I said, listen, if there's any one of you who would be interested in doing any kind of sports, you know, I mean, I think, you know, football was kind of my thing, but you can do, you know, we've all tried so many different sports, right? So we talked about different sports and stuff like that. And that was just the beginning of now Salomon United, where we have, you know, I mean, yeah, I have probably coached 1,000 women, at least, of refugee women in my country. But it started with me just driving out there and knocking on the door and talking to these 3 women. And after an hour conversation, I think I brought a cake. You know, they were just like, we can do any sport, right? And then we just started that. And I think it was a little bit the same thing when we said, okay, now we've done events in Denmark, and I wanted to challenge myself of saying, I love traveling, and what if how do you actually start going into another country, right? But it's almost similar, right? You need someone who knows it in that country. So you need to find those women in those countries that will do what you do. And then I had the experience of making events. So for me, it was figuring out how do I become friends with these people, and how do I guide them for them to end up doing an event, you know, a year down the road in their own country. And only with that in mind, that it had to empower them to feel that I can do it. You know, I made this women's football event in my own country, you know, in my own city, so they could get a sense of saying that they changed their own position in the city that they were living in. And we honestly have many conversations about these things. What is it that we're trying to change? You know, how can a football tournament, how can that create change in the neighborhood? And you know, in sports, it's not given that it is empowering people. You know, it can also take away things from people, the world of sports, you know, and then it's really male dominated. And I know that the US has been strong in women's football in some ways, but if you take women's football in Denmark and in many countries in the world, the players have not turned into leadership, women in leadership. And why is that? Has they been too long in a male-dominated world for them to dare to take leadership positions? And that means that if that's the case, how do we make sure that women in sports dare to take, you know, speak up for the world and dare to take leadership? So we have all these conversations. I'm trusting. I mean, this year we're going into Jordan and we're going into Saudi Arabia, and these are some countries where women's football is new and where it's just growing. And so those conversations are just extremely important. That what is the steps that I can take? What are the steps they can take? How can they talk to the teams about what kind of steps do they take so they become, as Tori spoke about, we are really also have to dare to look at ourselves as role models for anyone, you know, around us in this. Was there more in that question? Sorry, Abigail.
No, that was perfect. So many great pieces there. And I'm picking up on, there's this common theme that no matter if we're an athlete, if we're an entrepreneur, if we're a coach, if we're working a corporate job, there's a common theme here, and it's building your team. And it's shown through the work that these women are doing. But I really want everyone, if there's one takeaway here, and especially after Majken's story, it's to build your team and to just see the value of having a team and what teamwork can do. And Majken, something that struck me that I want to point out too, that I loved is, as I'm sure you've seen, there are so many organizations around the world that are run by white people. They go in different countries, and their goal is probably the right intention to have impact and bring sport and football to communities where it doesn't exist. But so often it's done in a way where, kind of like that voluntourism, that's not necessarily correct, where we arrive in a new place and we don't engage with the local community. We just kind of start teaching our way of sport and football. And what I love about what you've done is you've you've done this in a way where you said, I have this company, we have a Global Girls World Cup, and I've personally seen the value of sport. We all have seen the value of sport. So how can I take this internationally in a way that does it the right way and empowers women in their local communities and gives them the resources and tools so that way, you're not doing it for them, rather you're teaching them how to do it, and you're giving them new skills like leadership and feeling empowered and executing something, and especially in places and throughout the world where, as you were saying, men, even if women in sport is growing, we're still not having positions in leadership, and men are still dominating. And just the work that you're doing, I'm personally so impressed, and you've done it in such a way that's so team oriented, and really giving these skills to other women who might not have the resources, or depending where they're living, women might not have the opportunity. You're giving that opportunity, and that's just so important.
I think that there's so many. I mean, I was really good at my sport, right? I mean, and at the same time, that feeling of not really feeling that I belonged in the world, right? And that strange feeling of not really feeling we belong. That is I think that it is a challenge that we see so many of us. Whenever we have to do and build something, am I in the right place? Am I really right? And even though that we kind of really are trying to get that sense of self-empowerment to do things, there's still things throughout a day, every day in our life, where we kind of have a thing of saying, what is this my space? And of course it is my space to be in, right? But really taking it is a wild challenge. And that's also, it's like, since we have to practice, all of us here, right? I mean, we have to practice saying to ourselves, we belong in this, and we can do it. And if we can't do it, then I'm sure anyone here is, can always feel that they can always call me, call each other, and then we will find a way where we feel that sense of belonging. And sport is no one's. It's all of us to own sports, right? And we have to be. I'm starting fencing when the lockdown is over. So that's my new sport. I've never tried it. I've just learned out, but I have to challenge my knees because they're pretty fucked up from playing football, which I'm still playing, but now I have to do a complete new sport that will so fencing is my new thing. I'm on a +50 team.
Hey, all that, look at Jenn. She's the #1 supporter of that. You can always try something new. But it seems in almost every interview that I've done as part of the WOW series and at this event, there's a common theme, and it's that we felt like we hadn't belonged. No matter where you come from, I feel like as women, and especially in the world of sport, we felt like we haven't belonged in what we're doing, or a corporate job, or in any type of space. Comment or raise your hand or whatever if you felt that way. I know I certainly have in different times. That's so important, Majken, and thank you for creating a space to where women from around the world can finally feel like they belong. It's so important and incredible. But Nicole, let's jump to you. So going back to the outdated way that the fitness industry was running, my question for you, and what we'd all like to learn from, is how are you advising fitness professionals to take advantage of these new systems? And for someone who's looking to maybe start their brand or start a career as a trainer or as a new studio, how do you advise them, like the first systematic steps they can take, and your advice there? But then also, have you found that bringing the studios into the current times of technology can also help advance and create inclusive communities and provide more equality and opportunities to every different culture and background?
Yeah, absolutely. So things that I help, and not just fitness instructors, but also people who are in the lifestyle space if they have their own digital platform. And I like to say that I serve really anybody who is committed to the betterment and wellness of human beings. That can be someone who's a nutritionist or a chef, or anyone who has their own membership platform, something like that. But really getting with the times has a lot to do with systems and setting yourself up for operational success. Again, tapping into that experience in operations when I was like, oh, I don't want to do that anymore. Well, it's actually very, very important to have a foundation upon which you build your business. And something that I want to note too is that I really don't do mindset work with people. people come to me once they already know that they're capable of doing something. They know they're awesome. They know that they have value to provide, and they just want to figure out how to really have their digital culture resonate with their own clients. And I feel like it's 2021. I shouldn't have to say this, but something that people really need to step into the future into is inclusivity in the fitness space. If you Google fitness trainer, dance teacher, Pilates teacher, yoga teacher, fill in the blank teacher, it's going to be a slender, able-bodied white woman who represents the thin ideal. And I'm really over talking about body positivity in that whole conversation, because whether we are focused on the mainstream or fighting the mainstream is still the central point of conversation. And I just feel like we need to move past that. And the fact of the matter is if you're going to have a digital platform, it needs to be able to speak to your audience, because even like Emily said in the chat before, she can be in San Francisco and be taking class with her favorite instructor from New York. When you are in person in New York, in a brick and mortar boutique fitness studio, there are barriers to entry, and a financial barrier is a big one. If a class costs $36 on average to attend in person, you're going to see a lot of people who look like each other and come from the same background, maybe people who even work in the same industry. But going virtual, a lot of those barriers to entry have been totally eliminated. I know of certain classes who provide kind of like sliding scales of membership. So there's one instructor I'm thinking of in particular who has 3 tiers of her membership, and it's outlined very clearly which kind of bucket you would fall into. If you are somebody who has experienced any kind of job discrimination, or maybe you're unemployed, or discrimination because of your culture or background or race or place of origin, like, you have an option. And the memberships for people who maybe don't have that financial barrier, any kind of particular other struggles that prevent them from paying the full amount, like those tiers of membership kind of offset one another. And getting into the digital space and thinking forward has to do with inclusivity too. Like, it's not just about having like cool bells and whistles and picking out a digital platform that, wow, allows you to book classes, because yes, I help people set up their tech integrations and things like that. But at the end of the day, a software that allows you to book classes, or, you know, automatically add a calendar invite, or even sending out email marketing. At the end of the day, tech software, not that much different, all your options. What is different is how human beings relate to one another. And so positioning and branding and being able to communicate your values of your brand to your audience, that's something super major that's going to set you apart. Because when people fear, oh, well, how do I not be like everybody else? Well, the fact of the matter is, a lot of people are like everyone else, and that's not a great thing. It's about really showing, like, this is who I am. Yes, of course, but part 2, this is how I'm going to show up for you. Because everything that you see out there when it comes to kind of like coaching for these kind of people with digital platforms, it's like, here's how you can scale your business. Here's how you can hit this amount of money. Here's how you can do this. And it's like, it's not about you. It's about how you're making the experience better for your client. And if you do want to make your client feel like they belong and that they feel safe with you, you know, you have to have that be evident, not only in your actions, but how you represent your brand in itself. And like, not being able to have that high touch in-person experience, you have to figure out how to do it through a computer as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nicole. If we have any, aspiring or people who have their own business or are curious about showing up or starting any type of business, especially in the fitness space, that was fantastic advice. And what you said that I also thought was really important is how there's a new opportunity. Like I was thinking back to like when I'd walk into like a class here in New York, and it's like, even I felt intimidated because it was like the exact stereotype that you just mentioned, but that our new virtual world does remove that barrier, because if you relate to your instructor and what they're saying, you follow them on social media, you found them whatever, it's like you can show up in your virtual class. And here's my point. When you walk into a studio, immediately you're going to see I don't belong for all of those different reasons. But if you sign up for a class virtually and you're the speaker you can relate to, they look like you, they're creating a platform that feels like includes you, you're not going to have that barrier of walking in and not feeling included. You're automatically going to feel included because it's just you showing up with the instructor. So I never thought about that. And I thought that was really great advice and is so important. And also talks about identity, which brings into our last question here, with which I'm going to ask Jenn. This is a bigger question, so definitely everyone feel free to chime in. Jenn, identity has come up a lot in this conversation. We've all talked about it. We've talked about it in the chat. And identity can mean so many things for us, especially for us who are athletes or dancers or in this fitness space. Our identity can be tied to a sport. It can be tied to a team. It can be tied to a way of life and how we see ourselves and how active we are. You know, there's so many different pieces here. But in our interview, I loved when we talked about identity, and you told our community to remember that you're more than your sport. And taking that one step further, we also talked about how identity has played a role in your sport. Your background, you're half Latina, and you feel you have different communities and cultures here that you relate to and identify with. So I'd love if you could elaborate on how identity has helped you develop in how you see yourself and how you see others, but most importantly, how it's played a role in your athletic experience, and your advice for other professionals and how identity can help them navigate their career and athletic careers.
Great. Yeah, thank you. In terms of identity, yeah, I mentioned, you know, like when you're going through your journey and your process, right, your value, it comes with who you are, not what you do. And that's really, really important. I personally experienced, so I'm a really big person with connections and relationships. And, you know, once I finally reached like that goal to play internationally, it's almost like my thoughts and my values kind of were skewed. You know, I started being motivated by other things, and that really made me feel empty inside. You know, I was really stressed out. Even though like everyone around me, they were like, you're doing fine. Like, you know, you're being a great friend. Like you know, personally, truly inside, I had to look in the mirror and think, am I being who I know that I can be? Am I being a good friend? Am I being a good teammate? Am I being a great coach? You know, it was kind of like a time of reflection to reflect. And something that I realized was that my connections weren't as genuine. And not that I was being like fake or anything, but that the things around me were influencing me and I wasn't happy at a time, right? And I started associating who I am with what I was doing, you know, and like the losses were coming and I wasn't achieving those wins and everything. And I kind of lost track of that, you know. That was really big in my identity. And if there's anything that I can tell you today is that your value comes in who you are and what you do. It was kind of, you know, I had to reflect and consider my values again and kind of map them out and then find the solution to stay true to them and true to others. In terms of, and I'm kind of going skew, but I think this is really important because it's just part of my story as well, is, you know, keep those connections with people around you, relationships. That's who I am. That's something really important to me. And I kind of lost that at a point in my journey. In this past year, it was really, really big in reaching out to those, you know, filling your cup around with those that you love, those that support you. We've all talked about it here, your team. And it doesn't have to be a team sport. It can be your employees, your colleagues, your family, friends. And that's really, really part of my identity that fills my cup and that makes me happy. And then I can show up. I think Majken said it. I can show up and be true and genuine in my interactions with others. In terms of being, now going back to your question, half Latina, that was really big in my choice of going to play for Mexico. It was an opportunity to be able to represent my mother's country and be close to my family. Most of my family does live in Mexico, so it was a really important time for them to rally behind me and represent them at an international stage. It was huge. I can't even explain the feeling. It was really, really beautiful to have them just all be rallying behind me and also show that, just because we're a young country, we can make an impact on the international stage. And that's the goal, and that's the plan moving forward. And just because we don't have the resources, we will fight to get those resources. And if you have that passion and drive, we have a really, really bright future ahead. Obviously, there's those obstacles because we are a young team and they don't have that experience, but that's really important in expressing myself and my culture, because I did grow up in a Mexican household, and I think it's a very big thing for my family, especially my mother. So yeah.
Thank you, Jenn. I got goosebumps as you were sharing that. I can't even imagine how incredible it must have felt to solidify that you're going to play for the Mexico national team and have your family there supporting you. And it's just, I get goosebumps thinking about that, what that must have been like. And that's incredible. And I'm so happy that you can get back to sport in that way, in a way that, you're bringing your culture and community into it. And you have so many different pieces to your identity when it comes to an athlete, but then it comes to living here in the US, being raised here in the US, coming from a multicultural household, and then bringing sport into it in another level. I just love what sport can do for us in that way. So congratulations again for all the success that you've achieved. And it's really incredible to hear that story. And I know there's so many other women who can relate to your journey there. And thank you for sharing it. I would love to just go one by one through the speakers and just share kind of your quick last minute advice or words of wisdom that you'd like to leave with us all today. So Majken, we'll start with you.
I think right now the corona have given us a chance to think about what the role of sport is when we talk on both a very community level, but also on a global scale. And I think the world of sport has also been, struck by us maybe being at some level lazy or just doing what's normal, what we've done, over and over again. So I think this has given us a chance to talk about what is really the role of sport. If sport is about giving everyone, all age, any gender, a chance to move throughout their lives. So how we build a city, how we build clubs, how we build schools is all about giving us a chance to have our fitness right there around us and having access to it. So I think that would be my thing here, is for all of us to commute, get together with our peers and friends and stuff like that and have those conversations, because there's definitely a role sport can play that is much more inclusive and stronger and bigger and more playful than we have seen so far.
Thank you. I love it. We even inspired Emily, as she said, to try a new sport. Okay, great. Tori, you're up next.
I just have three things. One, all of you women just being here on a Saturday afternoon, I've been telling this to my young athletes, like my young women, that being a supportive woman, being intentional with your relationships with the women to the left and right of you is the new cool. I always tell them that like what their label is cool is not cool. This is cool. Being intentional and being supportive is the new cool. So I appreciate you guys for reminding me that. Secondly, you can't be where your feet are if your heart isn't there. So choose you, choose new things, choose your passion, because there's nothing, peace comes from being where your feet are, and you can't be where your feet are if your heart's not there. So I encourage you to do that. And lastly, there's never the right time to have conversations that protect your peace. And I stand by that. So always choose your peace and choose your happiness, because you can't serve others if you're not at peace. So have that conversation, make that appointment, whatever it is that you need to do. Choose you and choose your peace.
I love that. That gave me goosebumps again. Thank you, Tori. I'm going to write that one down for after this one. Nicole, you're up next. Last minute words and advice.
First of all, I'd like to say I had so much fun this afternoon with you guys. I'm so inspired. And my advice is to trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it's because it is. And if you experience resistance, it's because you're either not on the path that you truly believe in, or that you are doing something so monumental, but you're not ready for it to change your life. So even if you feel fear with that thing, push through it anyway, because it's going to feel so much better on the other side when you're doing things that you feel aligned with, rather than doing things to apologize to an old version of yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nicole. All right, Jenn, take it away.
I love all this. I'm also very inspired. So yeah, thanks everyone. For me, kind of said it before, just keep those connections and relationships. You know, you can go ahead and think you can do it alone, but there are people around you that are willing to give you that energy and support to achieve your goals or whatever it may be. And trust the process. 1% better every day. Just keep in touch and stay true to your values, trust the process, and you would be surprised of what you can achieve. If you trust the process, I can continue about the process. Like it will be so fruitful and rewarding at the end, and just continue on. So those are my words for you today.
Thank you, Jenn. Incredible. It's so true. I think it's trusting the process, trusting the unknown, and yes, thank you, everyone. If you like what you heard today, we have these events happening every single month. Please stay connected with all of us. Reach out to all the speakers. And if you're interested in our other conversations, we host events the first Saturday of every month, so you can come join us. These are our upcoming events. We also do the interviews on YouTube, so you can watch our interviews with all of the panelists here today there. I am so happy to have all of you here today and to open up and share your stories. It literally it's changed my life, and every conversation and panelists and interview and event here does. So thank you all for trusting me to create this community and to be here with you. And I'm just so humbled and excited to continue this work and to see everyone again a month from now.